She waited 20 years just to hand him a note. 4 seconds later, the richest man in the room couldn't breathe. Because it said, "You promised you'd come back. You didn't. Now you have a son." Damien Cole had signed documents that ended companies. He had held termination letters for people who had families and mortgages and no idea what was coming. He had sat across tables from men who wanted to destroy him and felt nothing. Not a flutter, not a skip, nothing. In 31 years of building himself into something the world could not ignore, his hands had never once moved without his permission. They were moving now. He smoothed the paper flat. Read it again. As if the second reading might change what the first one said. "You promised you'd come back. You didn't. Now you have a son." He lifted his eyes from the note. The waitress was already gone. He should not have been in that restaurant. That was the strange part. The part that would stay with him later, that he had chosen that specific place, on that specific night, for reasons he had never fully explained to anyone including himself. Damien rotated through 6 restaurants like it across the city on a schedule his assistant knew nothing about. Small places. Vinyl booths with small tiers in them. Laminated menus sticky at the edges. The kind of rooms where nobody cared who you were because they were too busy being tired from their own lives to notice yours. He told himself it was research. Due diligence. A CEO who didn't understand how the world operated at ground level was a CEO who would eventually lose his grip on it. That was what he told himself. But that wasn't why he came. He came because in these rooms nobody performed for him. Nobody laughed at a joke he hadn't made. Nobody leaned forward to agree before he had finished his sentence. In these rooms he was just a man eating a meal. And that was the closest thing to peace Damien Cole had found in a very long time. He had noticed her the moment she approached his table. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in the specific unadorned way of a person who had never needed to try. He noticed her because she looked at him the way almost no one looked at him anymore. She looked at him like he was simply a person who wanted steak. No recognition. No performance. No calculation behind her eyes. She wrote down his order, told him the plate would be 12 minutes, and walked away without once adjusting her expression. He watched her work the room after that. She moved with the contained efficiency of someone who had run this shift 1,000 times and intended to run it 1,000 more. She remembered orders without writing them down. She refilled water glasses before anyone asked. When a child at the corner table knocked over a glass of juice, she was there with a cloth before the mother could apologize, saying something quietly that made the child laugh instead of cry. She carried herself like a woman who had decided, some time ago, that other people's opinions of her were their problem and not hers. When she returned and set his plate down, she still did not look at his face. Her hands were efficient and steady. He found himself watching them, and that was when he saw what was on her left hand, and something in his chest did something he could not explain, and then she was already sliding the folded note under his palm and walking away before he had processed any of it. He read it a third time. Set it down very carefully beside his untouched plate. And for the first time in longer than he could honestly remember, Damien Cole did not know what to do next. He had been 12 years old when the world first showed him what it thought of boys like him. Hartwell House was not cruel in the way stories described cruelty. It was simply indifferent. The staff were tired. The building was cold. The other children had been there longer and had developed the particular social architecture of people who learned early that resources were scarce and alliances were survival. Damien didn't fit into any alliance. He was quiet in a way that some people read as arrogance and others read as weakness, and both groups decided they disliked him for it. He ate alone. He slept in a room with 5 other boys and spoke to none of them. He kept a book under his mattress and read it so many times the spine separated and he held the pages together with a rubber band. He was not unhappy in a way he recognized as unhappy. He simply existed. Waiting, though he could not have told you what for. She appeared on a Tuesday in November. He was behind the kitchen building. His corner, the one nobody else had claimed because there was nothing back there except a rusted pipe and the smell of bins, sitting with his knees pulled up and his lips still bleeding from what Marcus and the older boys had done after dinner. He heard footsteps and did not look up. He had mastered the technique of making himself small enough that looking became optional. The footsteps stopped directly in front of him. "I saw what Marcus did," she said. He looked up. She was his age. Her school jumper had a hole in the left elbow. Her hair was pulled back with a blue elastic. She was holding half a bread roll in one hand and a bruised apple in the other, and she was looking at him with an expression that contained neither pity nor discomfort. Just clear, steady attention, like she had come here with a specific purpose and was not interested in being sidetracked from it. "I don't need you to feel sorry for me," he said. "Good," she replied. I don't. I brought food because you're hungry. There's a difference. She sat beside him without asking. Tore the bread roll in half. She gave him the bigger piece, he noticed that immediately, and took a bite of the apple herself. I'm Elena, she said. I know. You've been here 3 weeks and you've eaten alone every single meal. I like eating alone. Nobody likes eating alone, she said simply. Some people are just better at pretending they do. He didn't have an answer for that. He ate the bread. She found him again on Thursday. And the Tuesday after that. And then it was simply a pattern. She arrived on the bad days, always with something saved from a meal, always without making a production of it. She never announced herself as his friend. She simply kept appearing, with the quiet consistency of someone who had decided he mattered and was not interested in arguing about it. She told him about herself in pieces, the way people do when they are measuring trust against the risk of giving it. Her mother had died when she was 7. She had been at Hartwell for 3 years. She was going to be a doctor, not with the wistful tone of a wish but with the flat certainty of someone reading a fact from a page. You sound very sure, he said once. Because I am, she said. Certainty is free. I might as well use it. He told her about his mother. The words came out slowly like something surfacing from deep water, and she listened without interrupting and without the particular expression people get when they are preparing a response rather than actually hearing you. When he finished she was quiet for a moment. She sounds like she loved you very much, Elena said. She did. That's not nothing, she said. I know, he replied. He had not known that until she said it. The ring happened on a Friday evening in late November, 10 days before his life changed again. He had found it 2 weeks earlier, caught in the drain of the courtyard, a thin silver band with a small blue stone that was almost certainly glass. He had pried it free and cleaned it every night in the bathroom sink. He told himself it was just something to do. He knew he was lying to himself. He did not stop. That evening he pulled it from his pocket and held it in his palm and looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at her. I found this, he said. I know it's not much. The stone is probably fake. But I cleaned it and I thought. He stopped. Started again. When I grow up I'm going to have something real to give you. I'm going to have a life worth having. And I'm going to come back for you. He paused. I promise. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her expression. Something layered, something that was not quite the smile that followed it but lived underneath it. You don't have to promise me things, she said. I know. I want to. She took the ring. Slid it onto her finger. It was slightly too large but she closed her hand around it and held it as though that were enough to make it fit. Then I'll keep it until you do, she said. The couple came 10 days later. Quiet, well-dressed, with the particular careful kindness of people who had spent time preparing for a child. They chose Damien. He had 1 hour to say goodbye. He ran every corridor. He checked the kitchen, the common room, the yard, the stairwell she sometimes sat in when she was reading. He grabbed one of the other girls who shrugged and said Elena was probably in the library was on the other side of the building, and the matron was already calling his name. He was put into the back of a car. He pressed his hand against the rear window as it pulled away and watched the building disappear behind a turn in the road. He told himself he would write. He told himself he would come back the moment he was old enough. He told himself a lot of things in the years that followed and the telling got quieter and quieter until it stopped altogether, buried under the work of becoming the person he had promised her he would become. He never wrote. He never came back. And somewhere in the process of building an empire he had convinced himself that the boy who made that promise no longer existed. Back in the restaurant the steak went cold. Damien did not eat it. He sat with his hands flat on the table and watched the waitress move through the room. She was at the far end now, taking an order from a family of 4. He watched her say something to the youngest child, a girl standing on the seat of the booth, and the child sat down immediately. Not because she had been told to. Because whatever Elena said had made her want to. He remembered that quality now, surfacing through 20 years of distance. The ability to make people feel that the right thing was their own idea. He had spent 2 decades in rooms full of people who wanted things from him. He had become very good at reading wanting. What he saw in her now was the opposite. A woman who had arranged her life so that she wanted nothing from anyone she did not already trust. She did not look at him once. He called her over when the family had been served. She stopped at the edge of his table. Her face was composed. Her eyes were careful, not afraid but alert, the way eyes become when someone has learned that composed does not mean unprepared. What's your name? He asked. A beat of silence before she answered. Elena. Something moved through his chest. Elena what? Does it matter? Yes. Voss, she said. Elena Voss. He looked at her hands. She let him look. The ring was there, slightly worn at the band, the blue stone catching the overhead light the way glass does, cheaply and perfectly. Where did you get that ring? Her jaw tightened by a fraction. It's mine. I know, he said. I'm asking where it came from. Somewhere a long time ago. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then she picked up his untouched plate. I'll get you a fresh one. This has gone cold. She walked away before he could respond. He waited. He was not a patient man by nature. He had built a life that ran at the speed of his decisions, and waiting was something he had largely engineered out of his existence. But he waited now. He nursed a glass of water. He watched the room empty as the evening shift wound down. He tipped the bill amount twice over and did not move. At 10:47 Elena came out of the back in her own clothes. Dark jeans. A gray jacket. A canvas bag over one shoulder. She did not look surprised to see him still there. She did not look pleased either. You've been sitting here for 2 hours, she said. And in the morning your phone started ringing and you were someone else again. You left before I finished making coffee. You didn't ask for my number. You didn't leave yours. She looked at him directly. Without flinching. 6 weeks later I found out I was pregnant. The word landed in the silence and stayed there. Damien did not move. He was aware of his own breathing in a way he had not been since he was a boy, conscious and effortful, like something that had to be chosen. He began a sentence and stopped himself. Because there was no version of the end of that sentence that was not an insult to her, and he knew it. I considered telling you, Elena continued. But you had already left twice. Once when you were 12 and didn't have a choice. And once when you were 31 and did. I wasn't going to chase you. I wasn't going to stand at the edge of your world and ask to be let in. I had done that differently for years and you never once looked up. You should have told me, he said. Maybe. But I decided that raising a child alone was easier than raising him to expect a father who might disappear again. The word father dropped into the room with the specific gravity of something that changes the shape of everything around it. How old is he? Damien asked quietly. 2.5. What's his name? Pause. The first hesitation she had shown. Marcus. Something moved in his face. Not after the boy at the home, she said quickly. I just like the name. He nodded slowly. His hands were flat on the table, working to keep himself assembled. She could see the effort, the way a structure looks when the load it is carrying has just doubled. Why now? He asked. Why tell me now after 2 years in a note on a restaurant table? When she spoke her voice was still controlled but thinner than before. The first sign that this was costing her too. Because he asked about his father. The sentence fell between them and neither of them moved. He's 2.5. He doesn't have the full language for it yet. But he sees other children with fathers and he points and he uses the word. He looked right at me and he asked. Her jaw tightened for just a moment before she brought it back. I refused to lie to him. I won't build him on a foundation of things that aren't true. He deserves the actual world, not a comfortable version of it. And the only honest answer meant finding you. You found me, Damien said. I've known where you were for 3 years. He absorbed that slowly. You never. No. Because I wasn't doing it for me. The restaurant was empty now. The lights had dimmed to the quiet register of closing time. Outside the street was wet from a rain that had come and gone without either of them noticing. Damien looked at the note still folded on the table. Everything I have, everything I built, I used to tell myself I was building it for a reason. That there was something at the end of it that would make the cost worth paying. And then it just became the building. Just the next thing. The next acquisition. The next version of a life that looked right from the outside. He looked up at her. I forgot what I was building it for. I forgot the girl who taught me that the biggest half of a bread roll was what kindness looks like when it has nothing left to prove. Don't romanticize it right now, she said. It doesn't help either of us. I'm trying to say I understand what I lost. You didn't lose me, Damien. You left me. Those are different things. He took that without argument because it was true and they both knew it. Can I meet him? Elena did not answer immediately. She looked at her hands. At the ring. The one she had worn for 20 years through every shift and every silent morning and every question she could not answer. She had told herself so many stories about what it meant. She had not always believed them. When she looked up, her eyes were steady. But they were not closed. "You don't get to walk into his life as if nothing happened," she said. "That moment, the first time he meets his father, is going to live in him for the rest of his life. It has to be right. I understand that. You need to prove it. Not to me. To him." "How?" "I don't know yet. That's the honest answer. I've spent 2 years figuring out what's right for him, and I haven't always gotten it right. I'm not going to pretend I have a perfect answer just because you're sitting across from me looking like you've finally understood what you've been missing." Pause. Long and real. "Maybe one day," she said. "When I'm sure. When I believe you mean it." "How will you know?" "The same way I always knew things about you," she said. "I'll watch. And you won't be able to fake it. Because I have always been able to see you, even when you couldn't see me." He walked out into the night air 20 minutes later holding the note in his left hand. He did not call his driver. He stood on the wet pavement outside the restaurant and did not move. The city ran around him. Cabs, voices, the distant percussion of a place that does not slow down for private reckonings. Damien Cole, worth $8 billion, stood on a wet pavement with a folded note in his hand and felt for the first time in longer than he could name the full weight of everything he had, and the full weight of everything that money cannot reach. Somewhere across the city in a flat he had never seen, in a room he could not picture, a boy named Marcus was asleep. A boy who had asked a question. A boy who deserved an answer. He opened the note one more time. Read it. Folded it carefully and placed it in his chest pocket over his heart, where he would carry it until he had earned the right to respond to it with something other than regret. Some promises do not disappear. They wait. They live in cheap rings and folded notes and in the questions of children who have not yet learned to stop asking. And when they finally return, when they find you on an ordinary evening in an ordinary restaurant dressed in the uniform of someone else's ordinary life, they do not ask to be remembered. They demand to be answered. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. Tell me, should she let him meet his son? Because part 2 is coming. And that little boy is going to change everything.